My name is Jennifer, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on and letting someone experience the natural consequences of their choices. The foundation of my marriage to Marcus had seemed solid for the first 8 years, built on what I believed was mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine love that had developed through years of friendship and partnership. We had met during our final year of college at a small liberal arts university in Ohio, where I was studying to become a high school English teacher and he was preparing for law school with dreams of becoming a prosecutor who would fight for justice and make a meaningful difference in the world. Our first encounter had been in the university library during finals week, when we were both pulling all-nighters to finish research papers that would determine our final grades in crucial courses. I had been struggling with a complex analysis of Victorian literature while Marcus was buried in a constitutional law textbook, and we had ended up sharing a table when the library was at capacity with stressed students cramming for exams. What started as polite conversation about our academic pressures had evolved into genuine friendship as we discovered shared interests in social justice, literature, and plans for careers that would allow us to contribute something meaningful to society. Marcus had been passionate about using his legal education to work as a public defender or prosecutor, fighting for people who couldn't afford expensive legal representation. I had been equally committed to teaching in public schools, believing that education was the key to helping young people overcome obstacles and achieve their potential. Our relationship had developed slowly and thoughtfully over the course of that final semester, with both of us taking time to build trust and understanding before making any commitment to a romantic relationship. We had spent countless hours talking about our values, our goals, and our visions for the kind of life we wanted to build after graduation. The connection between us had been intellectual and emotional rather than just physical attraction, creating a foundation that I believed would sustain us through whatever challenges we might face. Marcus had been everything I thought I wanted in a partner during those early years: intelligent, principled, ambitious in ways that aligned with my own values, and seemingly devoted to building a future based on shared ideals rather than material success. He came from a solidly middle-class family in suburban Cincinnati, where his father worked as a high school history teacher and his mother was a social worker who specialized in helping families navigate the foster care system. His parents had instilled in him values about the importance of education, hard work, and service to others that resonated with my own upbringing in a small town outside Cleveland. My father had been a mail carrier for 30 years, while my mother worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and both had emphasized the dignity of honest work and the importance of treating all people with respect regardless of their social or economic status. Our families had met during our senior year and had immediately recognized the compatibility between Marcus and me, as well as the shared values that had shaped both of our upbringings. Both sets of parents had been supportive of our relationship and had looked forward to the wedding we began planning for the summer after Marcus's first year of law school. The early years of our marriage had been characterized by the kind of teamwork and mutual support that I believed characterized strong relationships. Marcus had chosen to attend law school at Ohio State University, partly because the in-state tuition was more affordable and partly because he wanted to build his legal career in Ohio where he felt he could make the most difference in his home state's criminal justice system. While Marcus worked through the demanding years of law school, studying for exams that would determine his class rank and his opportunities for summer internships, I had taught English and literature at a local high school and had managed most of our household responsibilities. We lived in a small but comfortable apartment near campus, furnished with hand-me-downs from our families and garage sale finds that we had refinished together on weekends. I had genuinely enjoyed my role as a supportive wife during those challenging years, helping Marcus outline his case briefs, proofreading his law review articles, and providing emotional encouragement when the pressure of law school threatened to overwhelm his natural confidence. We had developed routines and traditions that strengthened our partnership: Sunday morning breakfast that we prepared together, evening walks around our neighborhood when Marcus needed breaks from studying, and Friday night movie dates that gave us time to reconnect after busy weeks. I believed we were building something meaningful together, creating a partnership that would serve us well throughout our lives as we pursued careers that would allow us to contribute to our community while also providing financial security for the family we planned to start once Marcus established his legal practice. Our conversations during those years had been filled with dreams about the house we would buy, the children we would raise, and the ways we would balance our professional ambitions with our commitment to each other and our future family. Marcus had excelled academically during law school, graduating in the top 10% of his class and earning recognition for his work on the law review and his performance in moot court competitions. His professors had praised his analytical skills, his writing ability, and his passionate commitment to using law as a tool for social justice. Several had written recommendation letters describing him as exactly the kind of idealistic but practical young lawyer that the legal profession needed to maintain public trust and effectiveness. During his final year of law school, Marcus had interviewed with several prosecutors' offices and public defender organizations, as well as a few small firms that specialized in criminal defense and civil rights cases. He had been particularly excited about an internship opportunity with the county prosecutor's office, where he had worked during the summer between his second and third years and had received excellent evaluations from supervising attorneys. But the legal job market had been more challenging than we had anticipated, with budget cuts affecting many public sector positions and increased competition for the limited openings that were available. Marcus had been disappointed when the prosecutor's office where he had interned was unable to offer him a full-time position due to hiring freezes, and he had begun to consider opportunities in private practice that he had previously dismissed as inconsistent with his public service goals. That's when he had been approached by a prestigious corporate law firm in Columbus that specialized in business litigation, and had been impressed by his academic record and law review publications. The firm had offered him a position as an associate with a starting salary that was nearly double what he could have earned in public service, along with excellent benefits and the promise of rapid advancement for associates who demonstrated exceptional skill and dedication. Marcus had been torn between his original ideals and the financial security that the corporate position would provide, and we had spent many long evenings discussing the pros and cons of different career paths. I had supported whatever decision he felt was best for his long-term happiness and our financial future, while also encouraging him to consider how different types of legal work might align with his values and goals. Ultimately, Marcus had decided to accept the corporate position with the understanding that he would work there for a few years to gain experience and financial stability, then transition to public service once we were more established and could afford the lower salary that came with prosecutor or public defender work. The plan had seemed reasonable and practical, allowing us to build a solid financial foundation while Marcus developed the legal skills that would eventually make him more effective in whatever type of practice he ultimately pursued. The first few years of Marcus's legal career had been demanding but rewarding in ways that initially seemed to validate his decision to start in corporate law. The work had been intellectually challenging, requiring him to master complex areas of business and regulatory law while developing the research, writing, and advocacy skills that would serve him well regardless of his ultimate career direction. The firm had a reputation for excellence and had provided Marcus with opportunities to work on high-profile cases that enhanced his legal knowledge and professional credibility. Marcus had thrown himself into the job with characteristic determination and enthusiasm, often working late into the evening and spending weekends preparing for depositions, drafting motions, and researching legal precedents that would support his clients' positions. The intensity of the work had been stressful but also energizing for someone with Marcus's competitive nature and desire to excel in whatever challenges he undertook. I had been understanding and supportive of his demanding schedule, recognizing that establishing himself in a competitive field required sacrifice and dedication, particularly during the early years when associates were evaluated constantly and advancement opportunities were limited to those who demonstrated exceptional commitment and skill. I continued teaching, which I loved, while also taking on more responsibility for managing our household and social life so that Marcus could focus his energy on building his legal career. We had used Marcus's increased income to make significant improvements in our lifestyle and financial security. We purchased a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a well-established neighborhood with excellent schools, planning ahead for the children we hoped to have within the next few years. We had also been able to pay off our student loans ahead of schedule and had begun building substantial savings for our future family and long-term financial goals. The material improvements in our life had been satisfying and had seemed to validate the sacrifices we were making during Marcus's early career development. But I had also begun to notice subtle changes in Marcus's attitudes and priorities that initially concerned me, but that I had attributed to the natural confidence that comes with professional success and financial security. Marcus had become increasingly interested in the lifestyle and social connections that came with his position at the firm, wanting to attend expensive client entertainment events and cultivate relationships with wealthy business leaders who could advance his career and expand his professional network. He had also become more critical of what he saw as the limitations of public sector work, arguing that private practice allowed lawyers to have greater impact and influence than was possible within government bureaucracies. The changes had been gradual enough that I initially attributed them to the natural evolution of someone gaining confidence and expertise in their chosen field. But over time, it became clear that Marcus was developing different priorities and values than the ones we had shared during our early marriage and his law school years. He seemed less interested in the public service ideals that had originally motivated his legal career and more attracted to the prestige and financial rewards that came with representing corporate clients in high-stakes business disputes. Our conversations began to center increasingly on his work achievements, his billable hour targets, and his progress toward partnership consideration, while the social justice issues that had once passionate shared interests received less attention in our discussions. When I tried to talk about my own students, my teaching challenges, or educational policy issues that affected my work, Marcus would often seem distracted or would redirect the conversation back to his own professional concerns and ambitions. I had also begun to notice that Marcus was becoming more critical of my career choice and its limited financial potential, suggesting that teaching was less important or prestigious than legal work and questioning whether I was making the best use of my education and abilities. These comments had been hurtful and surprising, since Marcus had previously been supportive of my teaching career and had understood that we had both chosen professions based on our desire to serve others rather than maximize our income. Marcus had been everything I thought I wanted in a partner: intelligent, ambitious, charming, and seemingly devoted to building a future together. He came from a middle-class family that valued education and hard work, and he had earned his way into law school through academic excellence rather than family connections. I admired his determination to succeed and his clear vision for the kind of life he wanted to create. Our early marriage had been happy and stable, marked by the kind of teamwork and mutual support that I believed characterized strong relationships. While Marcus worked through the demanding years of law school, I taught at a local high school and managed most of our household responsibilities. We lived modestly but comfortably, saving money for the future and planning for the day when Marcus would establish his legal career and we could start thinking about buying a house and having children. I had genuinely enjoyed my role as a supportive wife during those challenging years, helping Marcus study for exams, proofreading his papers, and providing emotional encouragement when the pressure of law school threatened to overwhelm him. I believed we were building something together, creating a partnership that would serve us well throughout our lives. After Marcus graduated and passed the bar exam, he had been hired by a prestigious law firm that specialized in corporate litigation. The position came with a substantial salary, excellent benefits, and the promise of partnership track advancement for associates who demonstrated exceptional skill and dedication. Marcus had been thrilled by the opportunity, and I had been proud of his achievement and excited about the financial security it would provide for our future. The first few years of Marcus's legal career had been demanding but rewarding, requiring long hours and intense focus but also providing the kind of professional satisfaction that comes from meaningful work and recognition for excellence. Marcus had thrown himself into the job with characteristic determination, often working late into the evening and spending weekends preparing for important cases. I had been understanding and supportive of his demanding schedule, recognizing that establishing himself in a competitive field required sacrifice and dedication. I continued teaching, which I loved, while also taking on more responsibility for managing our household and social life. We had used Marcus's increased income to purchase a beautiful house in a good neighborhood, and we had begun seriously discussing our plans for starting a family. But as Marcus became more established in his career and more confident in his professional abilities, I began to notice subtle changes in his behavior and attitudes that concerned me. He became increasingly critical of my career choice, suggesting that teaching was less important or prestigious than his legal work. He also became more interested in the lifestyle and social connections that came with his professional success, wanting to attend expensive events and cultivate relationships with wealthy clients and influential colleagues. The changes had been gradual enough that I initially attributed them to the natural evolution of someone gaining confidence and success in their chosen field. But over time, it became clear that Marcus was developing different priorities and values than the ones we had shared during our early marriage. He seemed less interested in the quiet domestic life we had planned together and more attracted to the glamorous world of high-stakes litigation and corporate deal-making. Our conversations began to center increasingly on his work achievements, his professional goals, and his frustrations with colleagues or cases, while my own experiences and interests received less attention and consideration. When I tried to discuss my students, my teaching challenges, or my own professional development, Marcus would often seem distracted or would redirect the conversation back to his own concerns. The drift in our relationship became more pronounced when Marcus was assigned to work on a major case involving a technology company that was facing a complex lawsuit over intellectual property disputes. The case required extensive collaboration with the client's internal legal team, including their chief legal counsel, a woman named Vanessa who was several years older than Marcus and had built an impressive career in corporate law. Marcus had spoken about Vanessa frequently during the months they worked together, initially in professional terms that emphasized her expertise and strategic thinking, but gradually with a level of admiration and enthusiasm that made me uncomfortable. He would mention her insights, her background, her approach to legal problems, and her connections in the industry with a tone that suggested he was developing feelings that went beyond professional respect. When I expressed concern about the amount of time Marcus was spending with Vanessa and the way he talked about her, he dismissed my feelings as jealousy and insecurity. He insisted that their relationship was purely professional and that I was being unreasonable to worry about his working relationship with a colleague. He also suggested that my concerns reflected my own limited understanding of the demands and dynamics of high-level legal work. But my instincts had been correct, as I discovered one evening when Marcus forgot to log out of his email account on our shared home computer. The discovery had been completely accidental and had occurred on what should have been a peaceful Tuesday evening in early March, when I was planning to surprise Marcus with his favorite dinner after he had mentioned having a particularly stressful day at work. I had been looking for a recipe for his grandmother's pot roast that I had emailed to myself several months earlier, intending to spend the afternoon shopping for ingredients and preparing a meal that would help him relax after dealing with difficult clients and demanding deadlines. When I opened the computer and clicked on the email icon, I had expected to see my own inbox with the saved recipe and other routine correspondence. Instead, I found myself looking at Marcus's email account, which he had apparently forgotten to close after checking messages earlier that morning before leaving for work. The first thing I noticed was an email from Vanessa that had arrived just an hour earlier, with a subject line that read "Missing you already," followed by a series of heart emoticons that seemed completely inappropriate for professional correspondence. My initial reaction had been confusion rather than suspicion, thinking perhaps that Vanessa was the type of person who used overly familiar language with all her colleagues, or that there might be some inside joke or professional context that would explain the casual tone. But as I read the first few lines of the message, which contained references to the previous evening they had spent together and expressions of affection that were unmistakably romantic, the reality of what I was seeing began to sink in. The email thread extended back several weeks, with messages that documented the development of their relationship from professional collaboration to personal friendship to intimate involvement. The earliest messages had been focused on case strategy and legal research, but they had gradually evolved to include personal observations, shared complaints about their respective spouses, and eventually explicit expressions of attraction and desire. Reading through the progression of their correspondence was like watching a slow-motion car accident, each message more devastating than the last as I realized how extensively Marcus had been lying to me about his work schedule, his travel plans, and his emotional availability. The messages revealed that many of the late nights he had claimed to be working on case preparation had actually been spent with Vanessa, either at expensive restaurants or at her apartment downtown. The intimate details they shared about their relationship were particularly painful to read, not just because of the obvious physical betrayal but because of the emotional intimacy they had developed that seemed to go far beyond what Marcus and I had been sharing during the same period. They wrote to each other about their hopes and dreams, their frustrations with their current lives, and their growing belief that they were better suited for each other than they were for their respective spouses. Vanessa had written extensively about her marriage to a fellow attorney who she described as boring and unambitious, someone who lacked the drive and sophistication that she needed in a partner. Marcus had responded with similar complaints about our marriage, describing me as limited in my aspirations and unable to understand or support his professional goals in the way that someone like Vanessa could. The characterization of our marriage in his emails had been particularly hurtful because it bore so little resemblance to what I thought we had been building together. Marcus had written about feeling constrained by my small-town values and my contentment with a modest lifestyle, suggesting that I was holding him back from achieving his full potential in both his career and his personal life. He had also shared intimate details about our private life that I had never given him permission to discuss with anyone, much less with a woman he was pursuing romantically. The violation of privacy and trust represented by these disclosures had felt almost as devastating as the affair itself, demonstrating a level of disrespect for our marriage that I had never imagined Marcus was capable of. The most recent emails had focused on their plans for the future, with both Marcus and Vanessa expressing growing confidence that they should end their respective marriages and build a new life together. They had discussed the practical challenges of divorce proceedings, the impact on their professional reputations, and their excitement about the possibilities that would open up once they were free to pursue their relationship openly. Marcus had written about his growing certainty that I would never be able to provide the kind of intellectual stimulation and social sophistication that he needed in a life partner, while Vanessa had responded with encouragement and affirmation of his assessment. They had both expressed the belief that they had found in each other something that they had been missing in their marriages, something that justified the disruption and pain that their affair would inevitably cause. The discovery had been devastating in ways that I hadn't anticipated or prepared for, affecting not just my trust in Marcus but my entire understanding of our marriage and my place in his life. Beyond the obvious betrayal and hurt, I felt a profound sense of disillusionment about the man I had married and the life we had built together over nearly a decade of what I had believed was partnership and mutual commitment. The Marcus who could carry on an affair while maintaining the pretense of a loving marriage was someone I didn't recognize, someone whose character was fundamentally different from what I had believed I knew about him. The casual way he had discussed our most private moments with another woman, the dismissive way he had characterized my personality and aspirations, and the calculated way he had planned his deception all revealed aspects of his character that seemed incompatible with the person I thought I had married. I had spent several hours that evening reading through their entire correspondence, torturing myself with the details of their relationship while also trying to understand how I had missed the signs of such an extensive deception. The timeline of their affair coincided with a period when I had been particularly focused on my own professional development, taking graduate courses in the evenings and working on curriculum development projects that had required significant time and attention. During that same period, Marcus had been traveling more frequently for work and had been spending longer hours at the office, changes that I had attributed to the demands of an important case rather than to his desire to spend time with another woman. The realization that I had been unknowingly facilitating his affair by being understanding about his schedule and supportive of his career commitments had added another layer of humiliation to an already devastating discovery. The practical implications of what I had learned were overwhelming, involving not just the immediate question of how to confront Marcus about his affair but also longer-term considerations about the future of our marriage, our shared financial obligations, and the life we had built together. The house we had purchased, the joint savings accounts we had built, and the plans we had made for children and retirement would all need to be reconsidered in light of what I had discovered about Marcus's true feelings and intentions. But perhaps most challenging was the question of how to process the emotional impact of learning that the person I trusted most in the world had been systematically deceiving me while also sharing the most intimate details of our life with someone who had become his collaborator in betraying our marriage. The foundation of trust and security that had supported our relationship had been completely shattered, leaving me uncertain about my ability to believe anything Marcus had told me or to trust my own judgment about the people closest to me. The discovery had been devastating in ways that I hadn't anticipated. Beyond the obvious betrayal and hurt, I felt a profound sense of disillusionment about the man I had married and the life we had built together. The Marcus who could carry on an affair while maintaining the pretense of a loving marriage was someone I didn't recognize, someone whose character was fundamentally different from what I had believed. Confronting Marcus about the affair had led to a series of conversations that revealed the extent to which our marriage had deteriorated without my fully realizing it. Marcus initially denied the relationship, then minimized its importance, and finally admitted that he had developed feelings for Vanessa that he described as more mature and sophisticated than what he felt for me. He claimed that his relationship with Vanessa was based on intellectual compatibility and shared professional interests that he couldn't find in our marriage. He suggested that I had failed to grow and evolve in ways that would keep pace with his own development, and that our relationship had become stagnant and limiting for someone with his ambitions and potential. The cruelty of his assessment had been shocking, But it had also been clarifying in terms of showing me how little respect Marcus had developed for me and our marriage over the years. The man who had once valued my support and partnership now viewed me as an obstacle to his personal and professional advancement, someone whose presence in his life prevented him from achieving the kind of success and sophistication he desired. Marcus had asked for a trial separation, claiming he needed time to figure out his feelings and decide what he wanted for his future. He moved into a luxury apartment downtown, closer to his office and to the lifestyle he apparently preferred, while I remained in our house trying to process what had happened to our marriage and what I wanted to do next. The separation period had been emotionally brutal but also enlightening as I began to understand how much of myself I had subordinated to Marcus's needs and ambitions over the years. Living alone for the first time in almost a decade, I rediscovered interests and aspects of my personality that had been neglected during my marriage. I threw myself into my teaching with renewed energy, took graduate courses to advance my own career, and reconnected with friends who had been marginalized during my marriage. After 6 months of separation, Marcus had called to inform me that he wanted a divorce so he could pursue his relationship with Vanessa more openly. He had spoken about their plans to move in together, their shared vision for their careers, and their belief that they were better suited for each other than he and I had ever been. He had been matter-of-fact about the end of our marriage, as if it were simply a business arrangement that had outlived its usefulness. I had been prepared for this outcome, having used the separation period to consult with my own attorney and begin the process of protecting my interests in the divorce proceedings. While Marcus had been focused on his new relationship, I had been documenting our assets, understanding my rights, and preparing for the legal and financial challenges that would come with ending our marriage. But before we could finalize the divorce proceedings, Marcus's perfect new life had begun to unravel in ways that he hadn't anticipated. The high-profile case that had brought him and Vanessa together had ended badly for their client, resulting in a significant financial judgment and damage to the law firm's reputation. Marcus had been blamed for strategic errors that contributed to the loss, and his standing within the firm had suffered considerably. Vanessa, whose career was more established and whose reputation was better protected, had distanced herself from the case's failure and from Marcus's role in it. As the professional relationship that had formed the foundation of their personal connection deteriorated, so did their romance. Vanessa had apparently concluded that Marcus was not the rising star she had believed him to be, and she had ended their relationship with the same calculating efficiency that had characterized her career advancement. Marcus had also discovered that the lifestyle he had envisioned with Vanessa required financial resources that exceeded his income, even with his substantial lawyer's salary. Vanessa had expensive tastes and high expectations about travel, entertainment, and social activities that had strained Marcus's budget and created stress in their relationship. The luxury apartment, expensive restaurants, and social events that had seemed exciting during their affair had become financial burdens that limited his options and created anxiety about his future. Meanwhile, I had been thriving in ways that surprised even me. The end of my marriage had been painful, but it had also freed me to pursue goals and interests that I had set aside during years of supporting Marcus's ambitions. I had completed a master's degree in education, had been promoted to department head at my school, and had begun writing a novel that I had been thinking about for years. I had also started dating again, though cautiously and selectively, and had met someone who appreciated my intelligence, supported my career goals, and treated me with the respect and consideration that had been missing from my marriage. David was a fellow educator who shared my values and interests, and our relationship was based on mutual admiration and genuine compatibility rather than the unequal dynamic that had characterized my marriage to Marcus. The contrast between my new life and the struggles Marcus was experiencing had become apparent to our mutual friends and colleagues, who reported that Marcus seemed increasingly unhappy and regretful about the choices he had made. But I had been focused on moving forward rather than looking back, and I had little interest in Marcus's problems or second thoughts about our marriage. That had changed 3 weeks before the divorce papers were served, when Marcus appeared at my door on a rainy Thursday evening, looking haggard and desperate in a way I had never seen before. It was nearly 9 o'clock on a night when I had been enjoying a quiet evening at home, reading a novel that one of my students had recommended and sipping tea while listening to the rain against the windows of the house that had become my sanctuary during our separation. The doorbell had rung unexpectedly, and when I looked through the peephole, I had been shocked to see Marcus standing on my front porch in the rain. He had clearly been drinking, and his usual polished appearance was disheveled and unkempt in ways that suggested he had been struggling with more than just the weather. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained, his hair was uncombed, and his face showed the kind of exhaustion that comes from weeks of poor sleep and emotional stress. He had asked if he could come in to talk, claiming he had something important to say that couldn't wait for a more convenient time or a more formal setting. His voice had been slurred slightly from alcohol, but more significantly, it had carried a tone of desperation and vulnerability that I had never heard from him before, even during our most difficult conversations about his affair and our separation. Against my better judgment, I had allowed him into the house where we had once lived together, though I had been careful to maintain physical and emotional distance during our conversation. I had offered him coffee to help sober him up, but I had made it clear that I wasn't prepared to have a lengthy discussion about our relationship or to reconsider decisions that I had already made about our future. Marcus had spent the next 2 hours detailing the ways his life had fallen apart since our separation, describing his professional setbacks, his failed relationship with Vanessa, and his growing realization that he had made terrible mistakes in destroying our marriage. His narrative had been rambling and sometimes incoherent, jumping between different time periods and different aspects of his current difficulties without much logical organization. He had started by talking about the case that had brought him and Vanessa together, explaining how it had ended in a devastating loss for their client and had resulted in significant damage to both his reputation and his standing within the law firm. The case had involved complex intellectual property disputes that had required months of preparation and had generated substantial legal fees, but Marcus's strategic errors had led to an unfavorable ruling that had cost their client millions of dollars in damages. The loss had been particularly damaging because Marcus had been the lead attorney on the case and had made several critical decisions without adequate consultation with more experienced partners. His overconfidence in his abilities and his desire to impress Vanessa had led him to take risks that a more cautious approach might have avoided, and the resulting failure had been blamed entirely on his poor judgment and inadequate preparation. Marcus had described the humiliation of being called into the managing partner's office to explain his handling of the case, the embarrassment of having his billing privileges restricted while the firm conducted an internal review of his performance, and the professional isolation that had resulted from his colleagues' loss of confidence in his abilities. He had gone from being a rising star within the firm to being someone whose future prospects were uncertain, and whose current assignments were limited to routine matters that carried minimal risk. But perhaps more devastating than his professional setbacks had been the disintegration of his relationship with Vanessa, whose interest in him had apparently been based more on his career prospects than on any genuine emotional connection. As Marcus's standing within the firm had declined and his future advancement had become questionable, Vanessa had distanced herself from both their professional collaboration and their personal relationship. Marcus had described the painful process of realizing that Vanessa's feelings for him had been largely calculated, based on her assessment of his potential value as a career partner rather than on appreciation for his character or personality. When his usefulness to her professional goals had diminished, so had her romantic interest, and she had ended their relationship with the same cold efficiency that characterized her approach to legal strategy. The rejection had been particularly crushing because Marcus had invested so much of his identity and self-worth in the relationship, viewing it as validation of his sophistication and success rather than recognizing it as the opportunistic arrangement that it had actually been. The realization that he had destroyed his marriage for someone who had never genuinely valued him had apparently triggered a period of serious depression and self-doubt that had affected every aspect of his life. Marcus had also discovered that the lifestyle he had envisioned with Vanessa required financial resources that exceeded his income, even with his substantial lawyer's salary. Vanessa had expensive tastes and high expectations about travel, entertainment, and social activities that had strained Marcus's budget and created stress in their relationship even before the professional setbacks had damaged his career prospects. The luxury apartment he had leased after our separation, the expensive restaurants where he had taken Vanessa to impress her, and the social events they had attended together had consumed most of his disposable income and had required him to dip into savings that he had originally intended to use for our divorce settlement. The financial pressure had added another layer of stress to his already deteriorating situation. Meanwhile, Marcus had learned through mutual friends and professional contacts that I had been thriving in ways that surprised even those who knew me well. He had heard about my promotion to department head, my completion of a master's degree, and my involvement in various professional development activities that had enhanced my reputation within the education community. He had also apparently learned about my relationship with David, though he had been unclear about the source of his information and had seemed genuinely surprised that I had moved on from our marriage so successfully. The contrast between my apparent happiness and growth and his own struggles had clearly been difficult for him to process, challenging his assumptions about how our separation would affect both of us. Marcus had begged me to consider reconciliation, claiming that he now understood what he had lost and that he was prepared to do whatever was necessary to rebuild our relationship and our marriage. He had promised to end all contact with Vanessa, to focus on repairing the damage he had caused to both his career and our relationship, and to prioritize our marriage above his professional ambitions in ways that he admitted he had failed to do before. He had even suggested that we could start fresh, perhaps move to a new city where his reputation hadn't been damaged and where we could rebuild our life together without the constant reminders of his affair and the professional failures that had followed. He had painted a picture of a simpler life focused on rebuilding trust and rediscovering the partnership that we had shared during our early marriage. The desperation in his voice had been palpable, but it had also been deeply unattractive and manipulative in ways that confirmed my decision to end our marriage. Marcus wasn't asking for reconciliation because he had rediscovered his love for me or because he had gained new appreciation for what we had shared together. He was asking because his preferred alternative had failed spectacularly and he wanted to return to the security and support that I had provided during our marriage. His entire presentation had been focused on his own needs and failures rather than on any recognition of the pain he had caused me or any understanding of how much I had grown and changed during our separation. He seemed to view our marriage as a fallback option that should be available to him whenever he decided he was ready to appreciate what he had lost, rather than understanding that his betrayal had fundamentally changed who I was and what I wanted from life. I had listened to his entire plea without interruption, allowing him to fully express his regrets and his hopes for our future while also observing how his desperation and self-pity had revealed aspects of his character that made reconciliation seem impossible even if I had been interested in considering it. When he finished speaking, I had calmly explained that I was no longer interested in being married to him, that I had moved on from our relationship in ways that couldn't be reversed, and that I would be proceeding with the divorce regardless of his changed circumstances. Marcus had been shocked by my response, apparently having assumed that I would be eager to reconcile once he expressed interest in returning to our marriage. He had argued that we owed it to our years together to try to work things out, that he was a different person than he had been during the affair, and that our marriage was worth fighting for despite the mistakes he had made. But I had recognized that Marcus's desire for reconciliation was motivated by his own needs and failures rather than any genuine appreciation for me or our relationship. He wanted to return to a situation that had worked well for him, where his career was supported by a devoted wife who asked for little in return and who provided emotional stability without demanding equal partnership or consideration. Against my better judgment, I had allowed him into the house where we had once lived together, though I had been careful to maintain physical and emotional distance during our conversation. Marcus had spent the next 2 hours detailing the ways his life had fallen apart since our separation, describing his professional setbacks, his failed relationship with Vanessa, and his growing realization that he had made terrible mistakes in destroying our marriage. He had begged me to consider reconciliation, claiming that he now understood what he had lost and that he was prepared to do whatever was necessary to rebuild our relationship. He had promised to end all contact with Vanessa, to focus on repairing the damage he had caused, and to prioritize our marriage above his professional ambitions. He had even suggested that we could start fresh, perhaps move to a new city where his reputation hadn't been damaged and where we could rebuild our life together. The desperation in his voice had been palpable, but it had also been deeply unattractive and manipulative in ways that confirmed my decision to end our marriage. Marcus wasn't asking for reconciliation because he had rediscovered his love for me or because he had gained new appreciation for what we had shared together. He was asking because his preferred alternative had failed and he wanted to return to the security and support that I had provided during our marriage. I had listened to his entire plea without interruption, allowing him to fully express his regrets and his hopes for our future. When he finished speaking, I had calmly explained that I was no longer interested in being married to him, that I had moved on from our relationship, and that I would be proceeding with the divorce regardless of his changed circumstances. Marcus had been shocked by my response, apparently having assumed that I would be eager to reconcile once he expressed interest in returning to our marriage. He had argued that we owed it to our years together to try to work things out, that he was a different person than he had been during the affair, and that our marriage was worth fighting for despite the mistakes he had made. But I had recognized that Marcus's desire for reconciliation was motivated by his own needs and failures rather than any genuine appreciation for me or our relationship. He wanted to return to a situation that had worked well for him, where his career was supported by a devoted wife who asked for little in return. He had no real understanding of how much I had grown and changed during our separation, or how little interest I had in resuming the unequal partnership that our marriage had become. I had asked Marcus to leave and had made it clear that I didn't want him to contact me again except through our attorneys regarding the divorce proceedings. He had left reluctantly, still apparently hoping that I would change my mind once I had time to consider his offer more carefully. But his visit had actually had the opposite effect, convincing me that I needed to finalize our divorce as quickly as possible to prevent any further attempts at manipulation or reconciliation. I had called my attorney the next morning and had instructed her to file the papers immediately and to arrange for Marcus to be served at his office in the most public and professional manner possible. The decision to have Marcus served at his workplace had been both practical and symbolic. Practically, it ensured that he would receive the papers in a setting where he couldn't argue or create a scene without damaging his professional reputation. Symbolically, it demonstrated that I was taking control of the situation and was no longer willing to accommodate his schedule or preferences in ending our marriage. I had also chosen to be present when the papers were served, not to gloat or create drama, but to witness the moment when Marcus realized that his options for reconciliation had been permanently closed. I wanted to see his face when he understood that I was serious about moving forward with my life and that his problems and regrets were no longer my concern. Standing in the lobby of his law firm that morning, watching the process server walk purposefully toward Marcus's office, I had felt a sense of completion and empowerment that had been building throughout our separation. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair 18 months earlier had been devastated and uncertain about her future. The woman watching him receive divorce papers was confident, successful, and excited about the possibilities ahead. Marcus had looked up from his desk as the process server entered his office, and I had seen his expression change from confusion to recognition to absolute shock as he realized what was happening. His colleagues had noticed the unusual visitor and the official-looking documents, and I knew that the office gossip would ensure that everyone knew about his personal difficulties within hours. The public nature of the service had been intentional, designed to demonstrate that I was no longer concerned about protecting Marcus's reputation or maintaining the fiction that our marriage was worth preserving. He had chosen to conduct his affair in professional settings, mixing his personal betrayal with his career advancement, and it seemed appropriate that the consequences should be equally public. After the papers were served, I had walked out of the law firm without looking back, feeling lighter and more optimistic than I had in years. The divorce proceedings would take several more months to complete, but the hardest part was over. I had made the decision to end my marriage definitively and had taken action to ensure that Marcus understood my determination to move forward. The months that followed had been busy with legal procedures, property division, and the practical details of permanently separating our lives. Marcus had attempted several more times to convince me to reconsider, sending flowers, letters, and gifts that I had returned without opening. He had also asked mutual friends to intercede on his behalf, apparently still believing that I could be persuaded to change my mind if the right arguments were presented. But I had remained firm in my decision, supported by the knowledge that I was happier and more fulfilled as a single woman than I had been during the final years of my marriage. The divorce had been finalized on a sunny Tuesday morning in early spring, and I had celebrated by taking myself to lunch at an expensive restaurant and then spending the afternoon shopping for furniture to redecorate the house that was now entirely mine. Marcus had been required to buy out my share of his law firm retirement account and had been ordered to pay spousal support for 3 years while I transitioned to complete financial independence. The settlement had been generous enough to allow me to pursue additional education and career opportunities without financial stress, and I had used the time and money to build the kind of life I had always wanted but had never prioritized during my marriage. I had completed a second master's degree in educational administration, and had been promoted to assistant principal at my school. I had also finished my novel and had found a publisher interested in my work. Most importantly, My relationship with David had developed into something serious and committed, based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than the unequal dynamic that had characterized my marriage. The contrast between my post-divorce life and Marcus's continued struggles had been stark and satisfying. He had been passed over for partnership at his firm and had eventually left to join a smaller practice with lower prestige and compensation. His relationship with Vanessa had ended permanently, and from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, he had not been successful in finding another serious relationship. The irony of the situation had not been lost on me. Marcus had destroyed our marriage in pursuit of what he believed would be a better life, only to discover that he had given up something valuable for something that turned out to be an illusion. His affair had been motivated by ambition and dissatisfaction with what he perceived as limitations in our marriage, but it had actually led to a life that was more constrained and less satisfying than what he had left behind. Meanwhile, I had used the end of our marriage as an opportunity to become the person I had always had the potential to be but had never fully developed while supporting Marcus's ambitions. The divorce that he had initially wanted and then desperately tried to prevent had been the catalyst for growth and achievement that exceeded anything I had accomplished during our marriage. Looking back now, several years after that day in the law firm lobby, I can see that serving Marcus with divorce papers at his workplace had been more than just a practical necessity or a symbolic gesture. It had been a public declaration that I was taking control of my own life and refusing to be defined by someone else's poor decisions or changing priorities. The woman who had been devastated by her husband's affair had evolved into someone who understood her own worth and was unwilling to settle for relationships that didn't provide genuine partnership and respect. The experience of rebuilding my life after divorce had taught me that I was stronger and more capable than I had ever realized, and that my happiness didn't depend on someone else's approval or commitment. Marcus's desperate attempts at reconciliation had been flattering in some ways, but they had also been insulting in their assumption that I would be available whenever he decided he was ready to appreciate what he had lost. His failure to understand how much I had changed during our separation had demonstrated that he still saw me as the supportive wife who had existed primarily to facilitate his success rather than as an independent person with my own goals and dreams. The public serving of divorce papers had been my way of making it clear that I was no longer that person and that I was no longer available to provide the kind of one-sided support that had characterized our marriage. It had been a moment of empowerment that marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where my own needs and aspirations took priority over someone else's convenience or comfort. Today, I am remarried to David, and we have built the kind of partnership that I always wanted but never had with Marcus. Our relationship is based on mutual support, shared decision-making, and genuine appreciation for each other's individual strengths and contributions. We both have successful careers that we pursue independently while also supporting each other's professional goals and personal interests. The experience of my first marriage and subsequent divorce taught me valuable lessons about the importance of maintaining my own identity and goals within a relationship, and about recognizing the difference between compromise and subordination. I learned that a healthy marriage should enhance both partners' lives rather than requiring one person to sacrifice their own development for the other's benefit. The day I served Marcus with divorce papers at his workplace will always represent a turning point in my life, the moment when I stopped being a victim of circumstances and became the author of my own story. It was the day I chose my own happiness over someone else's convenience, and that choice led to a life that is infinitely more satisfying and authentic than anything I had experienced before. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, but even better than revenge is the realization that you don't need it because you've built something better than what you lost. Marcus's affair and our subsequent divorce gave me the opportunity to discover who I really was and what I was capable of achieving when I stopped limiting myself to fit someone else's expectations. The process server walking into that law firm had delivered more than just divorce papers. He had delivered my freedom, my future, and my chance to become the person I was always meant to be. That moment of shock on Marcus's face had been worth every difficult day of the divorce process, because it represented the beginning of the best chapter of my life.